Vanakkam. Hello friends. We have been exploring the 5 landscapes of the Tamil people during the Neolithic times, and we come to the final landscape today, which is Paalai, the desert terrain. Did Neolithic Tamil country have any region that could be specified as Paalai, that is a desert? Typically, a desert is a region that receives less than 10 inches of rainfall in a given year, and depending upon the cause of dryness, there are 5 major classifications of deserts, all of which are found in the Indian subcontinent thanks to its wide geographic spread. The subtropical deserts, as found in the Great Thar, the coastal deserts, as found in the Rann of Kutch of Gujarat, the interior deserts, or rather dry scrub jungle regions of the Deccan Plateau. Then you have the rain shadow deserts, where the leeward slope of mountains sometimes cut off the monsoon rains, like for example the Agathiya Malai, which cuts off parts of the Thoothukudi and Tirunelveli districts, devoiding them of rain, leading to the dry Therikadu. And then you have the cold deserts, as in the large dry tracts of the Himalayas, an extreme of which are the polar deserts that are found in the Arctic and Antarctic, where large quantities of water are locked in ice sheets. Archaeological evidence shows that the deserts of the world were not always that dry. For example, if you take the Sahara Desert between 8000 and 3000 BCE, it had a much more moist and mild climate, and fossil evidence shows how animals such as the elephants, the rhinos, the giraffes, trees such as the lime and the oak, graves of human beings and their tools have been excavated, showing that it once must have been teeming with life, a green Sahara. Similarly, if you take the Indian subcontinent, the Gagar River that flows in the northwest, which becomes Hakra in Pakistan, it was a main source of water for the city of Mohenjo-daro of the Indus Valley civilization, which later changed course and completely became dry, causing the regions around Mohenjo-daro to become part of the Great Thar Desert. Now, coming to the Tamil country again, the challenge is, without any archaeological evidence that can directly prove that there was a desert region, we have to rely on language and literature. Thus, Tolkappiyam, that defines all the landscapes of the Tamil country, clearly defines Paalai with its own Mudar that is time and space, the first matter, Karuporul of a people, their occupation, flora and fauna, and the Uriporul, the behavior or emotion as influenced by the environment, in this case for Paalai, Piridalum, Piridal Nimittamum, separation. In the great Tamil epic Silappadiharam, which is actually a post-Sangam literary work, in the Kadukan Kade come these very famous lines, Mullayum Kurinjiyum Muraimayil Thirindu, Nalliyalbu Ilandu Nadungu Tuyar Uruttu, Paalai Enbador Padivam Kollum. What it means is that in the Tamil country, the hilly regions of Kurinji and forest regions of Mullai, during times of extreme drought without any rains, dry up and shrivel and look like a desert. Now, this similar thought is also echoed in the Periya Puranam, where it goes, Kola Mullayum Kurinjiyum Madutta Sillidangal, Neela Vaatpadai Neeli Kotangalum Nirandu, Kala Venilir Kadumbahar Polidinai Patri, Paalayum Solalavana Ula Paran Murambu. These lines actually describe not a desert but a process of desertification, but are so ingrained in Tamil psyche that the 13th century commentator of the Tolkappiyam, Ilamporanar, clearly mentions that Tamil country had no separate desert region, and it was the Mullai and Kurinji which sort of became a desert region during very dry hot season. Well, desertification is a process that occurs in semi-arid lands where, due to lack of rain and also due to the exploitation of human beings, where overgrazing of livestock and deforestation that removes plants and trees that anchor the soil, lead to the land becoming useless for cultivation. It is shocking to see that every year close to 6 million square kilometers of land are lost to cultivation thanks to desertification. Parts of the dry scrub jungles of the Deccan Plateau, as well as the regions of the Therikadu, the red sand dune regions of Thoothukudi and Tirunelveli, perfectly fit the description of desertification as outlined in Silapadiharam and Periyapuranam. But that apart, definitely poets and grammarians preceding the time of Tolgapiyar, maybe before first millennium BCE, definitely had witnessed firsthand the desert region as is given by the detailed codification that Tolgapiyanar adopts and presents as the Paalai Tinai. Well, as opposed to the general notion that the desert is an unfriendly terrain, unsung and unoccupied, you would be surprised to know that currently a fifth of the world's land area are deserts, and these deserts support a sixth of the world's population, that is about a billion people. Deserts, over a period of time, have also developed their own flora and fauna that have adapted to the dry conditions over thousands of years. So, with hot, dry, and empty being some of the adjectives used to describe a desert, these were not uninhabited regions. And if we were to go by the codification given in Tolgapiyam and also the numerous poems in Sangam literature that are dedicated to this Paalai Tinai, it is to be understood that ancient Tamil people had first hand experience of the desert region. Again, we also need to remind ourselves that Dravidian language and culture were spread over a wide part of the areas of Gujarat and Maharashtra, as indicated by the renowned linguist Franklin Southworth from the University of Pennsylvania, who has done extensive research in both the Dravidian as well as the Indo-Aryan language families in an effort to help trace the prehistory of the Indian subcontinent, where he clearly mentions that vast regions of coastal Gujarat and Maharashtra must have been under the influence of Dravidian culture, where people spoke a Dravidian language on a daily basis, and he gives a list of words, the roots of which are traced to Tamil, that are in use in Marathi even today, like for example, I, which is used to denote mother, which has its roots in Tamil. Obviously, some of the Sangam poems should have been set in these backdrops, going by the vivid description of the landscape as well as the similes that are used, that goes to show that poets were definitely recording first hand experience passed down through oral tradition. A poem in Agananuru 245 by Marudam Ilanahanar goes, Kurumpொறை உணங்கும் ததர் வெள்யென்பு கடுங்கால் ஒட்டகத்து அல்கு பசிதீர்க்கும் கல் நெடுங் கவலைய கானம் நீந்தி, goes the poem where the poet is describing a bone-eating camel. Now we know that camel as a draught animal found no place then and now in peninsular India, and this particular trait of the camel eating bone happens during extreme starvation conditions where the camel can live for days together without food and water. As opposed to the wrong notion that camel stores water in its hump, it actually stores fat. Hydrogen molecules in the fat combine with the oxygen that the camel breathes to form moisture, and the camel draws from its hump fat nutrition and moisture for 6 or 7 days together, and only after that, if it is still to starve, it starts eating a bone. So how did a Sangam poet, in this case Marudan Ilanahanar was from Madurai, how could he have known this unless it was passed down through oral traditions from a poet of generations before who probably lived in the coastal deserts of Gujarat? So, if desert regions were part of the geographic spread of ancient Tamil country, then obviously the defines or limits of the Tamil country as given by the introductory or Payiram of Tolgapiyam by Panambaranar that goes, Vada Vengadam Tenkumari Aayidai Tamil Koorum Nallulahattu. The same definition is also found in the Venil Kadai of Silapadiharam that goes, Nediyon Kundramum Todiyon Bavamum Tamil Varambarutta Tanpunal Nalnattu, meaning that the hills of the Tirupati range in the north and Kanyakumari, abundant by the Indian Ocean in the south, were the borders within which Tamil country existed. Now, this seems to be falsified. So, could Panambaranar have been a contemporary of Tolgapiyar? Now, there is a single poem in Kurundogai sung by a Parambaranar, and scholars are divided as to whether they were sung by two different persons, or whether the poet who sung the Payiram was the same poet who sung the song in Kurundogai. Whatever may be, if we look at Tolgapiyam Marabiyal, where Marabiyal lays out the traditional conventions that have to be followed, which cannot be changed, set rules, in a poem where Tolgapiyanar describes how the young ones of the elephant, the horse, the buffalo, the donkey, the yak, and the camel should be called the calf in Tamil as Kandru, யானையும் குதிரையும் கழுதையும் கடாமையும் மானோடைந்தும் கன்றெனற்குரிய எருமையும் மறையும் வரையாராண்டே கவரியும் கராமும் நிகரவற்றுள்ளே ஒட்டகம் அவற்றோடு ஒரு வழி நிலையும். If this were to be given as a genetic convention, then definitely it was because the camel found a place in the socio-geography of Tamil country. If you take the corpus of the Sangam literary works, again, many poems are dedicated to Paalai. In Ahananuru, out of the 400 love poems, 200 poems talk about separation, that is Paalai Tinai, and in Aingurunuru, another Sangam literary work, there are 100 exquisite heart-wrenching poems sung by the poet Odalandayar. And if you come to Kalitohai, the 35 poems of Paalai Kali, sung by Paalai Padiya Perungadungo, who has also sung Paalai songs in Nattinai, Kurundogai and Ahananuru, because of which he is given the epithet Paalai Padiya, all goes to show that this particular landscape must have been deeply ingrained and familiar to the ancient Tamil people. And given that these songs are classified as Paalai, not just based on Vuriporul, that is the behavior or emotional component, but also based on the first matter, that is space and time, where the space is clearly mentioned as Suramum, Suram Sarnda Idamum, Suram meaning dry sand, that is desertous region. Suram also means hot, Sudu, and there are many epithets like Venjuram, Kadunjuram, Viyanjuram, Kotchuram, which find a place in the poems of Sangam literature. Similarly, if you take the time, we have the macro time, that is Perumpoluthu, and micro time Sirupoluthu. The micro time obviously is 12 noon, the hottest period of the day, and the macro time overlaps with the months of April, May, June and July, that is the Ilavenil and Mudvenil Kalam, peak summer months. Now coming to the Woor or the town, we saw in the previous episode for Neidal how it was defined as Pattanam. For Paalai, it is defined as Kurumbu, meaning a village settlement in a desert tract. Coming to the people themselves, they go by the names Einar, Maravar and Kalvar, where Einar comes from A, which is the bow. They were very adept with the bow and arrow. And Maravar meaning fearless people, and Kalvar from Kal, that is dark, they were robbers. Their occupation is given as waylaying and robbery. Why? Because of the merciless and unproductive land that was the desert, with its own very fearsome goddess Kotravai. Now what is most interesting to us is the description of the flora and fauna in Sangam literature. In his work, Treatment of Nature in Sangam Literature, the great Tamil scholar Dr. Mu Varadarasanar, published in 1969, mentions, and I quote, "Their love of nature is so powerful as to permeate the themes of love as well as of war in their poems." Accordingly, the trees and plants that Tolgapiyam define as part of the desert landscape of Paalai are typical of very dry deciduous forests. For example, the Paalai tree itself, which goes by the name Kanupalai and Ulakkai Paalai, native to the scrub jungles of the Western Ghats, the Kirni tree, the Manilkara hexandra, today is found to be native to the dry border regions right from Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, along the west coast up to Kerala, Saduragiri and the Kalakkadu Mundandurai areas, going on up till Sri Lanka. Identified even today as a tree having a lot of socio-economic importance for the tribal people who live in these marginalized areas, the flowers of this tree have a medicinal value, and today it is seen how the tree still being grown in wilderness and not cultivated in an organized manner, the demand for the flowers of this Paalai tree has put extreme social pressure on the tribal people. One other tree of the Paalai region is the Mahua tree, that is the Iluppai or Irumbai in Tamil. And this tree has very sweet flowers from which the tribal people brew an illicit liquor, which is even today banned in states like Gujarat and Bihar. And they consider this a part of their cultural heritage. The tribes of Orissa even worship the tree known as the honey tree because of its sweet flower. There is even a saying in Tamil that goes, "Aalai illa oorukku ilupappu sakkara." Here the Aalai meaning a sugar cane crushing unit. If it is not there, then depend on the Iluppe flour for sugar. Well, in Tamil Siddha tradition, it is even noted how excessive use of this flour can lead to mental imbalance, even leading to lunacy. Again, quoting Mu Varadarasanar from his treatment of nature in Sangam literature, with descriptions of nature based upon close observation so accurate that a botanist might acquire a correct idea of the vegetation of Tamil Nadu. Edward Balfour, the British botanist who published his catalogue of the timber trees of South Asia in the year 1862, explains one of the variations of the Paalai tree, the Veppala, the Rhytia tintoria, that is found in all the dry forests along the coast of Mumbai to the scrub jungles of the Chevroy Hills, especially on dry sandy sites or hillsides. He talks of the several uses that the tree had for the tribal people, and one interesting fact that he records is that if the bark of the tree is removed, the inside looks exactly the shade of ivory. Now, this is quite surprising given the fact that the tree goes by the name Thandappalai in Sangam literature. Pidi pasi kazhaiya perungai velam mensinai yama polikum goes a line in Kurundogai 37, where the scene is of an extreme condition where there is absolutely no water to drink, and the Velam, a male elephant, pulls down the bark of a yamaram, that is the veppalai, and squeezes out moisture and the drops of water that trickle out, with which it feeds the pidi, that is the female elephant. Such are the extreme conditions of dryness portrayed in Sangam poetry, which could have happened only in authentic desert regions. Again, the Ulingai balloon vine is a weed-like plant that lines the pathways in subtropical desert regions. Coming to the animals of this territory, the wild Asiatic dog, the dhol, known as the Sennai, is oft repeated in many Sangam poems. This dog that hunts in packs is called as Vetekaran by the hill tribes of the Javadi Hills, and a poem sung by Siraikudi Andayar goes, Vetachennai Kilaithon Michil Kulavi Moita Alugar Sinnir, meaning a pack of these wild dogs dig up a pit in the sand, a wootru, and drink water, and whatever is left is used by the hero and heroine who are passing that way. Now, maybe ancient man learned to make these kind of sand pits for water, observing the Sennai, and the water body of Paalai region as defined in Tolgapiyam is the sand spring. In the love poems of Paalai Tinai, where the hero has to go away, leaving behind the heroine in search of material wealth, is caught in a quandary as to go or not, and he asks his heart to guide him in the right way. Dr. Muva says, the world of nature and the world of man, these two subjects are woven like the warp and the weft in fine tapestry of ancient Tamil poetry. The ancient poets have united the power that observes the phenomena of external nature with an insight into human feelings as either influenced or affected by them. ஒன்று தெரிந்து உரைத்திசின் நெஞ்சே goes a song. நீல் அல் ஈரத்து பால் அவி தோல் முலை அகடுநிலம் சேர்த்தி பசியட முடங்கிய பைங்கன் சென்னாய் மாயா வேட்டம் போகிய கணவன் பொய்யா மரபின் பினவு நினைந்து இறங்கும் goes a song. Here, the situation is such that there is a female Sennai, that is the wild dog, that has just yielded a litter of pups, and so famished is the dog with absolutely no strength left that its teats are lying to the ground and there is no milk for the little pups. Seeing this, the male dog feels distraught and runs around in the Paalai region trying to bring it some food. Now, seeing this scenario, the hero, who has already left on his sojourn away from the heroine, is reminded of her and the situation back home and is really caught in an emotional war as to whether to proceed or to go back to her, and hence he addresses his heart to guide him. Such poignant situations are plenty in Tamil poetry, which goes to establish the fact that the Tamil Neolithic settlements were wide enough to include geographical regions of maybe the desert scrub forests of the Deccan Plateau or the Rann of Kutch, and these poems in Sangam literature recorded carried forward memories. So we now know that Tamil people lived and flourished in all the five landscapes as defined by Tolgapiyam, and then starting with 1200 BCE, the Tamil country enters the early Iron Age, which is very interesting and important and about which we will see in the next episode. Vanakkam.